Do we have any public comments? Any public comments? Third and final, any public comments? Hearing none, we move on to item 3, approved minutes of April 20, 2023.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Mark, second by Lynn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Approve agenda. Did we have any amendments?
I sent out yesterday an amendment to the agenda
Yes.
to include septic system contract for Barron's under 7C3 and then adding 7D well sealing contract with Bob Christie.
Yep.
So I sent that out yesterday and I have the extra materials at your places.
So the one we have is the amended as noted. Any
Yeah.
other discussion
With the
on the
red
amendments? Any other amendments?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Bob, second by Mark. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Approved consent items.
Okay. All right, we have 2 checks to approve. One for Winona County for my time for the Whitewater, as well as for QTH, which is the company that manages the domain and the hosting for the websites that we have for the Whitewater. And I just want to note, I did put an amended bills payable. I had a mishap with printing the check for QTH, so then I reprinted it, so I voided the 3,200 and I have 3,201 as that check.
That's on page 5.
Yes, but I handed out an amended bills payable with red
Gotcha.
letters that indicated that.
Okay.
And so the total checks are $3,374.24. And the mishap with the printer is that my laptop, which has the QuickBooks, does not print. So then I'm kind of jerry-rigging and retyping what's in the check into my personal computer and then using the printer.
Wait a minute here. Say that again now?
My printer is not printing. The printer prints, but the laptop is not sending a signal properly to the printer.
Is it just the QuickBooks side or is it the whole
It's
printer?
anything on that laptop. But
But
that's all I use that laptop for, is printing QuickBook checks,
And whose laptop is that?
the county's.
Oh, well then, IT.
Yeah,
Check with
IT, I'm bringing it over to IT this
Okay,
afternoon.
yeah, they should.
Yeah,
Sick.
so, and we thought we had it fixed last time, because it happened last meeting as well, but I think it's a different issue than what they thought it was.
Technology fails us?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
It'll get fixed, I'm positive of that, it's just, but anyway.
Good. Anything else?
So you need a motion to approve the bills payable amended?
Amended a lot, but that's all in consent items.
Okay, that's all consent, all right.
Motion made by, was that a motion?
Yeah, that's a motion.
Motion made by Mark, or by, excuse me, Marcia, I'm eating here. Second by Mark.
Have another cookie.
Well, they're so dang good, quit bringing them. I don't,
Yes, thank you, they're very good.
all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, board reports. Let's start down to your end, Lynn.
Got a lot of things going on, but nothing definite yet. We're working on hiring another person and so forth, but nothing firm yet, I guess, so.
Okay. James?
Had a full house actually last meeting.
Really?
There must have been about 15 people there.
Wow.
A lot of them were new staff that were being introduced and some of the regular crew and then a few other people just showed up on interest. And not a whole lot of business, but did do let's see, what do we call it? One cost share for prescribed grazing, which was for the board. Interesting. I guess I always thought it was called rotational grazing. But, so contract that had someone set up to go through that.
A lot of different slang terms for different ways, mob grazing, and, you know, different things. I was gonna know it, we had 15 people in ours, it'd be standing room. Our little room is so small for such things.
You have to stand sideways.
I understand side by side. So, all right, anything else, James?
So I can
Thanks, Mark.
I can't think of anything.
Marcia?
Just a sidelight, I sit on the 1-1, the river watershed, and we had our quarterly meeting a week or two ago, and we did a site visit. Crooked Creek near Caledonia had worked on a project, basically big, I call it a big dam water project, the flow. And the one gentleman on our board had started that project almost 20 years ago, and it was like a $100,000 project, and everybody kept weighing in, and it ended up, and it finally got done, and it was a $700,000 project when it got done. Looked nice. It was really controlling a huge watershed coming down through, and benefited him greatly. But it was nice to see a project completed,
Right.
and how much it impacted the area and such.
Yes.
So, other than that, I know the WinLAC, Chris Meyer sits on that and gave us this brochure the other day at the county board meeting, and that's moving forward. And there is a little difference. Another role I sit on, I'm on the MCIT board, and that's basically the insurance company for counties, excluding Olmsted, and 81 counties belong to it. And the way...
We're not cool enough for them, or they not cool enough for us? How does that work?
I haven't determined that. But, so different, the 1-1, the watershed things, the 1-1, the way they organize, feel the need to buy insurance. And I said, we're all part of counties, we're all part of this, I just don't understand the need for, in my opinion, we have a lot of duplicates in our insurance. And, but we're always approving, it seems like somebody's joining the MCIT group for liability insurance and stuff, so it's just some organized in different ways. The 1-1 doesn't, I don't know, WinLAC, I think, no.
Because we're collaborative, and I know there are some one watershed, one plan.
That are joint powers.
That are joint powers boards.
Yeah.
Then they get MCIT because they are their own fiscal entity.
Yeah.
And they do all the signing on the contracts and the agreements directly.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
So, I don't know, if you're paranoid, I guess
We can all be insurance poor.
Yeah, we could be, yes.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you, that should cover it.
Well,
Oh, Wabasha is just dry, warm.
that old narrative.
Smoky.
I had the Board of Adjustment and Equalization the other night. Nobody in attendance, made some minor adjustments on 6 or 7 parcels. Property values continue to go up. Assessor's office worked through most of them, so it was a good deal. Other than that, pretty quiet.
Can I ask him a question?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
so in Winona County, we had a parcel, Bob Bamnick, our recorder, we had a parcel, 107 acres near Bethany, which is kind of north of Lewiston, 13,700, I think, or 13,100 an acre. Are you up to that?
There was some parcels sold this spring in that 13.2 to 13.5.
So it's just,
Ag land went up 22.3%.
yeah.
So
All right.
it's
Yeah, it's,
crazy.
it'll be interesting, but with dairy prices on the downturn now, grain
Yeah.
prices, we'll see where they go. I guess
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little something I was gonna allude to. I travel all over the place. So I just started another location over in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, so we got a group of staff over there getting going. I've been down to Missouri, Iowa, in northern Illinois, and I tell you what, there's a lot of really good crops out there the farther you go south, and go right through here, the span from our guys running, eastern Dakotas to western Wisconsin, that whole region through there, she is bad. Man, that's not looking good. And the corn's starting to curl now. The corn survived, but the beans have been hit hard. Of course, you get up in Central Sands, they just flip the switch on, but there's still a lot of dry land farming up there. And so it just depends on where you're at, but we go back to, one of the things that I always talk about is nitrogen management and different things like that. And then these off years, it can create a scenario in growers' minds that, as we continue to probably see pressure in nitrogen management and things like that, these off years get to be a little bit off-putting because it begins to negate things that are in the industry to help nitrogen mitigation, because they'll say, see, it's dry, I can't, anything, if it wasn't for my soluble nitrogen, I wouldn't have a crop, that little bit of rain or whatever it is. So it starts to work against that narrative of trying to figure out, more cost-effective ways to manage land. So, especially through nitrogen management and stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see what the industry looks at after this year, because we see this in pockets every year, depending on where it's at in the Midwest. When they get into the drought areas, Nebraska has been hit really hard. We got some growers down there. And, the way they look at nitrogen and the way we look at nitrogen are two totally different things. So it'll be interesting now to see kind of in our backyard with what this goes and how this fall's perception for inputs going into 2024, how they're going to change their mindset, because growers tend to kind of do that. It's almost influenced when we get the short spring next year, or the early fall, and we get the early frost, and it's me 95-day corn. When we get the late fall, I want 110-day corn. It's like year to year to year. And so, me being an advocate for everybody that's known for years and years and years on here, nitrogen management has been a big passion of mine, and trying to work with some of the innovative things. So that's what I'm seeing now throughout the countryside. I was not actually at our last meeting for SWCD. I was in Missouri, actually southern Iowa, Missouri, and again, the crops look pretty good down there. But I do know that Wanda is going to approach the board on behalf of the RSWCD, and actually I believe it's on election day.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's on election day, and kind of give a presentation to the board, saying, hey, don't forget about us out here, and request a little more money. And I think it's one of the more formal presentations that we've done. We've done them in the past, but she's putting a lot more effort into these now. So I think those are kind of the main points I had. So, all right. Anything else from anybody on board reports? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 7A, board discussion action items, financial update. Sheila, draft audit.
Okay, in your packets, we had our draft audit. I also have a management representation letter that needs to be signed. I got it the day after our last meeting, so, and actually that should happen first, but, this is kind of a formality with us saying that we are concur, and this is how we do our financial. So I got it from the auditor, and then I put our letterhead on it, so this is.
What page is that?
15, the draft. 15.
The letter is on page 12.
12.
Yeah, it's dated May 18th. She said, don't change the date.
Oh, okay.
And so it has a spot for me to sign as project coordinator and Josh to sign as board chair. And it basically says, as an entity or a government entity, we have fulfilled our responsibilities, and and that we are cooperating with the auditor and providing all the information that is required to do the audit completely.
Any discussion on this? Kind of same old, same old.
Yeah, well,
Little
kind
bit.
of same old, but I wanted to point out, so that's the authorization or the management letter. But then in the draft audit, I reviewed it and compared it with previous audits. And one thing different that I wanted to bring out is right at the end. They always have the statement that when they come up with potential issues, they say that, well, one potential issue is that because of the size of the organization, you're having just one person and not having somebody else do a check on what I'm doing with producing the checks. And when I come to the meeting, I bring the checks, and then accompanying the checks are all the invoices to substantiate the value that's on the check. And one thing they do check with the audit is they check all the grant agreements that we have, and that the monetary value in the grant agreements and the bills payables, that they're all tied, so they connect all the dots that, money goes in, money goes out, it's all accounted for, there's nothing going anywhere else. But, so they have that as listed as 2021-01 segregation of duties, so that's always in the audit. But in addition to that, they added 2 extra issues of concern, and then they say that because it's created because the board has a limited number of personnel with financial reporting experience, namely me. I'm not an auditor, I'm not a bookkeeper. But anyway, but this was new for 2022. They say that their suggestion, tied to having just one person doing that, they recommend that we suggest management establish effective review policies and procedures, including, but not limited to, the following: reconciling general ledger amounts to the draft financial statements, review of all supporting documentation and explanations for journal entries proposed by us, complete the disclosure checklist and review and approve of schedules and calculations supporting the amounts included in the notes to the financial statements, and apply analytic procedures to the draft financial statements, and perform other procedures considered necessary by management. And then the other one, they recommend that the board be constantly aware of all procedures and processes involved in recording transactions, accruals, and reclassifications, and develop internal control policies to ensure proper recording of these items. I was going to ask, because Wanda's my backup for anything QuickBooks, and of course she's on vacation, and I didn't want to, so I guess they're there, and both these extra notices of concern are related to the size of the organization and the staff involved. And I guess I was going to connect with Wanda and say, okay, what do you recommend that we could do in addition to what we are doing that could help support this, so I don't get these 2 next year's audits? And then the other thought, then I was also going to call the auditor directly and say, okay, for an organization our size, what do you recommend as being a feasible alternative, or what can we do in addition to what we're doing? Would it be providing the financials that are presented to Bob to sign to everybody?
That was one of my suggestions, was having the treasurer, secretary or treasurer actually review those scenarios. The other thing, Sheila, I think, is this is covering their butt
Oh,
more than it's covering our butt.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Just,
Yeah,
Yeah, this sounds like lawyer mumbo jumbo
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we need to just dive into this thing, but a simple protocol, I think, go back to Peterson's. The other thing you could do is, we switched to Smith Schaefer, and we talked about that here too, but we just don't have it
we
complicated
don't
enough
have,
to make that work.
yeah,
But Wanda might be able to say, hey, Wanda, look to see if that protocol exists in ours.
okay.
And see what, and go that route. And then I would call Peterson and just say, hey, we can't make a mountain out of a mole, or, out of this molehill. If we just have a simple document that our treasurer or secretary takes a look at, would that be adequate, or suffice what we would need as this kind of backup to Sheila's and embezzling?
Right,
Right.
right.
so Wanda is sort of a water director.
Yes, she's,
Right.
yeah, and in
Yeah,
fact,
for Winona County.
Yeah, and
But she's a QuickBooks.
she is a
Sure.
QuickBook whiz,
Sure.
and she's the district manager now, but she was doing the bookkeeping before, and And she still is knows what's going on with the finances. And she has been, you know, my backup, you know, anything QuickBooks, I give Wanda a call and I say, okay, and we have the exact same QuickBook version, so she can tell me, okay, click here and look up in the top right corner and see that tab, click there. She knows it backwards and forwards.
She
And
cleaned our QuickBooks up, which
She
was
did.
an absolute
She
mess,
did.
but it took a number of years, but it is now dialed in, so.
Yeah,
I think that would be the simplest
Yeah,
way.
I
Yeah.
kind of got to agree that, you know, it's more so for covering themselves than it is us.
okay.
So I would call them up and say, I need the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid, and just go from
Okay.
there. I wouldn't
Yeah,
dive into
yeah,
this
and I
with
didn't
you.
want to, you know, have anything really cumbersome, but I thought, is there something that we could be doing in addition that doesn't take that?
Simple signed affidavit from the treasurer says, yes, I've reviewed, you know, something simple that, you know, I believe this to be correct. Go from there and ask one of us, Ms. Schaefer. and then-
Well, right now, Bob does sign the financials. And so what you get in your packet is just the summaries, the summary sheets, but he has the detail sheets.
Yep.
And he signs those, and I put tabs in different places.
I think this is more like a year-end type scenario, isn't it? Like an end of the, that's what I'm saying, that's
Oh.
simple. That's simple, kind of, yep, we do what we do internally, but somebody's saying, hey, yes, there's a system of checks and balances that we went through the whole year. That's that piece of paper that just says, this is what we do. He reviews the full sheet, you know, this is the Peterson question. Is there something you have, obviously, they have put this in multiple people's, something, to have this, right?
Right.
And say, hey, part of this, for this audit, could you help us just design some simple, here's what we do, put that
Right.
on a piece of paper, and that's a procedure that we follow. We sign that at the end of the year saying, yes,
Okay.
that's the procedure we follow throughout the year, exactly what you just talked about. Bob reviews the details, we see the summaries, he's the second set of eyes, the audit's technically the third set of eyes,
Okay.
year one, two.
So maybe that would include, at the conclusion of this year, maybe sometime in January, when, you know, when everything, you know, we know the end date of what's
Before
our-
they get this,
It's closed down.
he's got
Right.
that.
I sit down
Set
with
it.
Bob and say, okay, here are all the expenditures tied to this grant, adds up to this, and da-da-da.
And that's that little SOP, standard operating procedure, that how we do that.
Okay,
There's our piece of paper,
okay,
signed by the secretary saying, yes, we followed that, right? And it can even be signed by the chair. And then it's our internal audit to our financial person.
before the audit.
Before the audit. To me, that's what this is, and even, I'm gonna say 80% of this is to cover their butt.
Yeah.
Other 20%.
I agree.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Maybe try that.
Okay, yeah.
See what they
But
say.
I'll follow up with the auditor and with Wanda and
Yep.
report at the next meeting what we think we can do.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Any other discussion on that?
Right.
All right, here, let's go on to B, local advisory team grant, approved nitrogen
Do you want
fertilizer.
to go over the,
Oh, over the audit?
no, the budget itself, for the reconciliation summaries?
Oh, again?
So at the end of April, we had 117,761. And
Hold on, what page are you on?
page 6.
That makes it a lot easier.
And
There we go.
so that includes both the money market and the checking account minus the unearned income. And then on page 9, that amount was pretty much the same, 117,918. I did, based on Commissioner Ward's suggestion, shift money from the checking over to the money market, and it did accrue substantially more in interest than in the checking account. So I did do that since the last meeting.
Can't go crazy with it.
I know.
Something better than nothing.
But once we start spending down, I'll have to pull back, but
Yep,
it is what it is.
yeah.
Every little bit helps.
Yeah. So that's all I had on the financial statements.
Any other discussion?
The only thing, and these are accurate and everything, is how does it compare to like last year? Or, you know, a lot of documents we get, what was last year's amount at this time versus this year's?
We had a little
Do you do
bit
some of that?
more.
Do you do any of that
last-
in any of your reporting? Do you compare?
No, I do not, but
Okay.
that's probably a good suggestion.
Yeah,
You know,
'cause-
just pulling up the last year this time.
And see where you are,
Mhm.
if you're on track, if something's, you know, varies considerably. We do that a lot. And then when you do and of course this is a financial, when you do a budget then too, I always appreciate the percentage you've spent, you know, but that's not this, but that's the budget where you're at.
Definitely a good idea. One of the problems we have is our funding is,
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
we don't have a
It's-
consistent tax base coming in.
Yeah,
So these little boards like this, we can be broker and broke one month and
yeah,
200 grand the
I
next
know,
month.
and that kind of reflected in the
SWCD's the same way.
proposed budget that I did for next year. I had to do that
Yeah.
at the April meeting. Well, I didn't know in April that I was able to get an extension on the one grant that we currently have, so now that,
Flips.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it was the, you know, budget that was approved.
sure.
And it makes
Do
it
the
hard
best.
for doing budgeting
Yeah.
because we don't know what
No.
We
monies we're
don't
gonna
know,
have.
and we
It's
don't know
so
what grants are
difficult.
coming down the pipe. Yeah.
So there's a lot of assumptions and
Guesstimations.
guesses.
Yeah.
And hopes we
Yeah,
can.
sometimes I feel like you're at a dartboard and just kind
Yep.
of, yeah, that looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, but yeah, I think last year probably a little stronger than this year,
Mm-hmm.
so.
And so then I need a motion to approve the draft audit, and then at the next meeting, they'll provide the final.
So moved.
Second.
So we got a motion to approve the 2022 draft audit, made by Mark, second by Bob. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Sheila, on to B.
Yes.
Anything else on that? All right, perfect, thank you. Local advisory team grant.
Okay, this is the grant that we have with MDA to help with the meetings that they have with the landowners for the Dwizlas. So this would include, right now, it's Altura and Elgin, and Utica's on hold until they get their well situation resolved and figuring out that new Dwizma boundary. So the grant that we have right now ends at the end of this month. So MDA put together a new grant agreement to go until June of 2025. This one includes expenses to cover my time to help with 17 meetings with the local advisory teams. That's connecting, emailing, notifying them, and doing follow-ups, taking notes, coordinating the meeting spaces. And then also we put in 5 field days with landowners. So that's what I have on the table, and it includes, after discussion, it's set up in DocuSign. So if it's approved, then I would go into DocuSign and finalize it. But it was reviewed as to form by Stephanie Nettle. And
What's the amount on that?
pardon?
What's the remaining amount of the extension? What's the amount? Is it in here?
This one is for $28,426.
So I don't want to get off on a tangent here about the Elgin Duisma group.
Sure you do, Bob.
Has that been well attended? I know you
Yes,
mentioned it in the past.
yes, we
and-
have 17 people on the list. And I might add, 2 of those are with the city of Elgin, 2 of those are agronomists, so the remaining are farmers. And I know we had a discussion about, larger landowners. The one larger landowner is now on the list.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
So out of the 13, are there multiples from one landowner? In other words, like a husband, wife, Or is it?
No, those are-
Those are 13 separate.
Different
what we would
entities.
Different entities, okay,
I
just
think-
trying to understand.
I think
Because that
there
could
might-
equate to
there
3,
are
4 people,
two-
you know?
Brothers, but they have separate farms.
Okay, I was just making sure we were.
Yeah, no, they
Okay.
are separate entities. And
Can we back up just a second? 17 on the list, 2 are from the city of Elgin and 2 were
Two
from...
agronomists.
agronomists,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yep. And then that number for Altura is 12. And we have 1 from the city and 3 agronomists on that one.
And that's just who signed up or who,
These are people who have been contacted and said, yes, we will be on the local advisory team.
So what does this advisory team do?
They are tasked with, well, first of all, we've been reviewing what the groundwater hydrology is and what the situation is for the wells in that particular DWISMA. And so they had a hydrologist from MDA come and give a presentation. So just so that everybody understands. And, you know, these are our source areas. These are our high priority areas within the DWISMA. And so now we're at the stage of identifying, now that we know what the situation is, we want to know, if it's kind of a learning period for the MDA from the locals to identify what are the best management practices that you have tried and which ones worked and which ones didn't work. Because if they don't work, they're off the table. We're not even going to discuss those.
When you say work, you mean they work to reduce the amount of contamination of the aquifer? Or
They
in
work in the farmer's perception, or, you know, that they work for their operation, that they're effective, and also to reduce nitrogen. So they will be.
hopes to reduce nitrogen.
Right. And then there will be some alternative management practices that will be considered. Might be cutting edge, you know, so there's opportunities to experiment and study and see if there's any practices out there that, well, let's try this and see what happens. But in the end, each local advisory team is to come up with a list of best management practices that they think will be effective, that there will be efficiencies in their, you know, that the goal is to find practices that work for the farmer, that they're convenient, that they're efficient, they work for their bottom line as well as reducing nitrogen. And then once that list is developed, then it goes to the commissioner of the Department of Ag, and then it's approved. And then the local farmers in that DWISMA they need to implement those practices for 3 growing seasons. And I'm not sure how it'll be tracked or whatever, but just to see how things are going, because we know that there's a lag time, and that's still being reviewed. The U.S. Geological Survey is doing, and they did some samples of the water in Plainview, Elgin, and I think Utica and Altura. And so they took these samples, and sometime this summer, they're going to have the results to be able to say, of this parcel of water, X percentage of it is this old, X percentage of it, you know, so they're really digging down. And, you know, and then that, they hope to be able to figure out the lag time for that particular well, you know, for the water that's being drawn from it. And so, I don't know, it sounds fascinating, but then, you know, wow, how can you do that with water?
Yeah.
But anyway,
They can age water like that.
yeah,
But I mean, they already know the information as far as like an average in this part of the state.
okay.
Whatever you apply underground goes down at a rate of 7 to 14 feet per year.
Okay.
So if you,
7 to 14
yeah,
feet per
so
year.
even if you took the fast 14 and you had a 400-foot well, that's 400 foot by 14, you go at 28 or something like that.
Okay,
Does it depend on, the substrate or whatever?
Right, but that's the average, 7 to 14.
Just
So
and
if you
that's
take
the
fifth-
vertical?
That's the
one?
vertical, yeah.
Okay,
So you put it on today, and it'll go down.
Yep. So if you want to make changes, the
It'll-
best case scenario is going to take you 28 years to see those changes.
right.
And this alludes exactly to what I've been saying with this whole scenario. Knowing this information, being in agronomy for so many years, I mean, take the state of Minnesota, and this is what scares me with these duismas, because the part they're not talking about is 50% compliance. 50% compliance, that is a state law where the Commissioner of Ag can stamp it and say, no, this is no longer optional. You will farm like this. It doesn't matter whatever economic disadvantage it is to those local people. My fear is we start with a duisma here, and we start with a duisma here, and we start with a duisma here. And what's ironic is the same group of people that push for these types of things are the same group of people that don't want to see anybody get bigger, get ahead. And I guarantee you that when regulation comes through, the little guy is going to be the first one to leave. Guarantee it, because it's farming getting smaller and bigger, and we're going to have more regulations in it. But my fear is that these duismas aren't going to act fast enough, and they're going to get bigger and bigger, and we're going to start filling in the gaps, and it's just going to make it harder and harder, because it ain't happening fast enough.
I tend to disagree though with your statement on the little guy is gonna get left behind.
I hope not.
Because I look at my operations, I'm working to reduce nitrogen.
Yep.
I know not everybody can be no-till and cover crops,
Yeah.
but I've been no-till cover crops for a number of years, and I'm working on cutting rates, where a lot of these guys just, well, 200 pounds is good, we'll put 250 on, we'll get more. And that's where the problem is. So I think
I
some
mean,
of the,
economically disadvantaged. That's what I mean by that.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
doing what you're doing. I mean, they're gonna be, the banker's gonna say, I'm sorry, but the guy they're in deep with that's running all this land, they're gonna make sure he keeps going.
Right.
And they're gonna
No,
figure
I-
out,
I-
that's
yeah.
what I meant by that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just no different than the dairies. They're getting bigger
Mm-hmm.
and bigger because the little guys can't survive. They can't compete anymore. And that's my fear, is that we don't give this thing enough time. So that's why in these meetings,
Right, and they're giving it time.
I'm saying, hey,
That's-
this is a 2-decade type scenario before we start going out here pounding on these farmers saying, well, you're not doing it good enough. You know, because we don't know how old some of this stuff
Right.
is. And we can't take the blame today for what was done. I mean, we can,
Exactly.
but we also have to have, we don't want to put ourselves in an economic disadvantage.
I agree.
And it's going to put a lot of people out of their farms.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's my fear. And so I keep harping on this drum. Please give this time. Don't blow it up. Don't get impatient with this thing.
I just worry though that, I mean, when we set up these WISMAs, and I don't have a whole lot of background with this, but if you set up a group and you got 2 people from the city and 2 people from the government, and you got 13 people that are landowners or farmers, and they're supposed to come up with the best management practices, they have a great deal of knowledge of what's the best management practices to increase the production on their land, but I don't know that they have a great deal of knowledge of how to protect the aquifer down below. And those 2 things sometimes work against each other, you know?
Right.
And so I think we might just be spinning our wheels, just trying to say that we're doing something and we're really not doing anything. Because we know what takes nitrates out of the soils and what holds the soils on the ground. We know that. It may not be what some of the landowners want to do.
Correct.
Everything that everyone said, I've been listening, but definitely a person's financial situation or the age of the operator and how much flexibility you have is a big thing. Because I'll just tell you one crazy thing that I think I'm doing this year. We've got 17 acres of
Don't do
beans.
something crazy.
And I didn't use like the knockdown, which I normally do to take down the rye. And because of the dry conditions, the beans are there, they're looking okay, and the rye isn't quite as lush that it smothers it out like it normally does. So my friend was saying, how come you didn't knock that down? And I said, oh, I'm just gonna let it go to seed, and then I won't have to worry about how I'm gonna seed the rye later. So now I think I might actually try it on 17 acres.
See how that works, huh?
Yeah.
See if the beans can overcome that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't do it if I was 25 again and desperate and have my soybean yield
Yeah.
booked to like 5 bushel short at the elevator in the fall to get the price.
But that alludes exactly what I'm talking about. The young guy, the guy that doesn't have the longevity, doesn't have the deep pocketbook, the bank's gonna be the first person to kick him out.
Right.
And when these things start to happen, because he can't go invest in that new piece of tillage, or he can't afford to take the risk in this Duisma and end up with less yield or whatever that is. So they begin to put an economic disadvantage to the people that don't have the deep pocketbooks. And at the end of the day, this is what I was alluding to. The bank doesn't want to see big companies fail, right? And so the little guys, this is the 80s all over again, right?
I
You know?
didn't understand your statements.
Yeah, no, as far as I think, who do we see doing the best practices? Right now, it's the smaller farmers. But they're doing it not only out of a desire to do the right thing, but they're also doing it saying, hey, I have the ability to go do some of these little trials and cool things because I don't have a 90-foot planter, or I don't have a, 60-foot, whatever. You can
And
get in
if
there
I
and
pour
go play.
yield on that 17 acres, it won't kill me.
Yeah,
Right.
Right.
right,
So,
right. And you're in a seasoned farmer and probably sitting financially pretty good. Like you just said, if I was young and 25 and living paycheck to paycheck trying to farm, you couldn't afford to take that risk.
no.
And so really inherently what this does is it puts people in these areas at risk. And like I said, the little guy, I don't mean this even size-wise, but just the younger farmer, the guy that doesn't have the deep pocketbooks, that can't afford to go play with this and risk that, he's gonna be the first guy out. And that's my fear. We saw that in dairy too. We saw all these young guys try to get into dairy back in the late mid-2000s, after the Land O'Lakes scenario, and how many of them failed because they just couldn't make it through the slump, and so I just hate to see that push out because there's just less and less people wanting to farm anymore.
Yeah, well, we need smaller farmers, because the bigger farmers don't have connection to the land. I mean, it's just
Correct.
somebody else's
Oh,
land.
I don't know about that.
I
I don't
see
know what
that all
that's
the time.
doing. I got a lot of small farms around me and they're struggling and the
Struggling.
young kids, they don't want to, they don't want to take that risk. They don't want to be tied down 7 days a week.
For the dairy
And-
people.
Yeah,
dairy
yeah.
people, yeah.
Well, even crop, any kind of animal and stuff.
I'm not
So
talking animal, I'm talking row crops. So when I see it from my perspective is that we have the bigger farmers who farm thousands of acres. They didn't grow up on that farm and they have no connection to the neighbor on the farm, and all that is just a source of income. So what can I make off that acre this year? Whereas a smaller farmer who has a connection and sees themselves owning that property and passing that farm on to their kids.
But the kids don't want
I know
it.
the kids don't
That's
want
the
it.
problem.
Oh, that
The
is a
kids don't.
Society has changed, sadly.
that
I was
is-
thinking,
that is true.
the other day, how much time.
Now I got the
nobody can work.
retiree from Chicago living in my neighborhood, and they want to change it all together again. Why aren't you paving my road? Well,
How
we
much,
bought it.
how much time people are looking at electronic
Yeah.
devices
Yeah.
or things like that. I mean, you wonder why we don't have enough people to do real
Actually
jobs
do- yeah, do
sometimes.
real
and that.
jobs.
So my
So the-
grandson asked me yesterday, he says, Grandma, why don't you have any animals? They say coming to the farm, they live in the cities, coming to the farm. Well, animals take a huge commitment. Grandma would have to be, I couldn't
Risk.
play as much, I have to, they don't understand. Even 5 chickens a couple years ago tied you down,
You gotta be there.
One of the
Yeah.
perceptions, and Mark, I'm gonna allude to your point on this, and I do this a lot because oftentimes we are so, in any geographic area, for the most part, you know what you see, right? You kind of say, well, what's a large farm to you? What's considered a large farm to anybody in here? I'm just
A
curious.
farm is a contiguous
Couple
farm.
thousand acres, is that considered a
A
large
large
farm?
farmer is.
Sounds
thousand
reasonable.
acres.
Yeah, large farm, a couple thousand acres. But now, let's just step into central Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is 2,000 acres a large farm?
no.
Probably
Let's
not.
go to Montana. We do a lot of work out in Montana. Is 2,000 acres a large farm? Absolutely not. That is a small farm. They are struggling. They're like, we can't find land, right? In central Iowa, if you farm 2,000 acres, you're going to the back of the John Deere dealership to pick up the little front wheel assists over there, while everybody else is in front buying 3 and 4. I work with a farm in Iowa that has 11 combines, brand new, every single one of them. Okay? And 7 90-row planters.
Here's what's changed,
So-
so this is really.
Those are big farms.
About when people fail, because they let those people go in the 80s. If times went tough, bam. And now they don't
That's
want that.
exactly what I'm talking about. When times get
Now they don't
tough,
want that kind of disaster.
Right.
It seems like they've been propping up.
those guys, I just call them the little guys for a slang term, but financially challenged, say whatever you want. It will take out the types of farms that we think can allude to a positive change. And so when we begin to discuss large versus small, I know what I consider large farmers that are phenomenal farmers. And they got large because they are phenomenal farmers. They nitpick down to the nth degree every unit of nitrogen. They're like, nope, I'm not putting that out there because I've done all the testing, I've done the research, it doesn't pay. I'm not putting insurance in out, you know, and they're always looking for the new thing. And then I know large farmers that are like, let's just throw 30 units of insurance in it. I farm 30 foot of topsoil in central Iowa, and my soil can handle it. And away we go. Well, it ends up in the tile line, and out it goes, right? So we can't categorize them by size too much because I know poor small farmers. And I really just look at information. So we go back to your part, alluding to what you said, Mark. One of the things that I continuously do, and have done for almost 20 years, is I challenge the landowners that are renting their land to set standards to regardless of whoever's renting it. You have the ability to do
They
this.
don't, yeah, they just, yeah.
And they don't want to because they want to take the biggest check they can get because their property taxes are going up.
Well, what if we address that at a county level? What if we set up our whole county as TIF districts, and then when a farm parcel is farmed in a certain manner, then we give them a TIF so that we reduce their tax rolls. So that would incentivize these landowners to say, well, you better put a cover crop on because now I'm going to pay 20% less in property taxes if you do that.
Homestead's got all the money in the world.
Yeah.
That's what no people.
Because that money goes on to the rest of us. The money goes on to the rest of us.
Interesting
We all set a
concept.
levy.
Yep.
But I mean, that's how you incentivize. So you can either use a carrot or a stick. And that's a carrot.
And that would be something, you know, let's say down the road, because we do know right management can help reduce with all these things. And more than anything, even if it doesn't necessarily have a direct impact on the nitrogen in the water right away, and this is why I keep saying be patient, we know the profitability of farming goes up when we manage inputs better, just like any other business, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it is. So that's part of what we do with all these alternative type things in education all throughout the Midwest is we say, hey guys, I mean, I own a fertilizer facility, right? But I'm out actively saying you don't need to buy that much urea. You don't need to do it. You can do this, you can do that, you can do this. And you know, at the end of the day, that educational piece and bringing all the education to the landowner, whether they're farming it or not farming it, and saying, hey, you can set guidelines on your land. You can do things that you want to do. But so often I see people that own the land and rent it out. It goes to the highest bidder. But with that comes no regulation.
Right.
Yep. Checks.
Checks in the mail.
All right, Marcia's not going to get out of here by 10 if we keep going.
Great. I move to approve this nitrogen fertilizer tuition grant.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion made by Bob, second by Mark. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I forgot about your 10 o'clock. I was doing really good. I was trying to speed through this.
It's good conversation. I like this idea of a TIF on the farm.
Yeah. Okay, whitewater drinking, yeah, where are we at here?
Yep.
Yeah, whitewater seed, whitewater drinking water protection grant,
Yep.
line item 1. Sheila.
Okay, so we have, I have a document from Bowser to extend the drinking water protection grant. We did an amendment to it, and now that needs to be approved. And so now this will go until the end of '24. And this one provides some monies for the well sealing, septic system upgrades, as well as cover crops.
How much is that one?
The total is $191,550.
Okay.
So we're just extending the end date from the end of this year to the next year. No monetary change.
You think I ought to abstain from this one?
No, I
No.
don't think so, because it's more general drinking water protection.
This is just an extension
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
Because you drill wells?
Yeah, we seal wells and then someone lets you.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
That's a part of it, but it's not.
Yeah.
Not
I-
directly.
Not
Yeah.
an individual.
It's just
Yeah.
like cover,
Yeah.
we sell cover crops.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I need a motion for
Yeah,
that.
I'll move to
Okay.
extend this.
Second.
And is the motion for me to do the DocuSign into the EOA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a
And I'm
motion.
assuming that was the same for the
Yeah.
previous one too.
Correct, yeah.
And who made the motion?
I-
And
So Marcia made the motion,
Second.
second by James. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Any other
Aye.
discussion? Okay, cool. All right, 2, we're moving. See, now we're
Yes.
moving.
yeah,
Marcia.
we're plugging.
All right, Wabash County SWCD sub-agreement.
Okay, so this is a sub-agreement. This is an amendment to the sub-agreement that we had previously under the amended grant. So this one again extends it to next year, and we changed
Just
the
a little
cover crop.
verbiage in
This
there.
is with Wabasha SWCD for cover crop technical assistance. And so they will provide technical assistance for cover crops. And the big change that we did, we had 3-year cover crop contracts previously, but now we just have 2 years remaining on the grant. So single contracts, you can have up to 2 one-year contracts under this agreement, so with the farmers. Yeah, so they would approve the contracts and then send them to here for payment. They would approve them at that, technical authority. And then the rates on the cover crops are $40 for single species, $50 for multi-species, up to 50 acres, and $10 additional per acre if that acreage is in a DUSMA.
Do they have a pound? Do they have a seeding rate associated to that?
Nope. We wanted to keep it a little bit more simple.
Okay.
But
'Cause I mean,
the
you look
poundage,
at a bushel of rye
yeah,
at $14
yeah.
on a single species. That means they're getting paid $26 to put it in. Boy, sign me up for that. What do you think? I'll put cover crops in for $26 an acre? Heck, yes.
I used to like to plant about 80
We wanted people to
pounds.
do it, and,
Yeah.
but
There's a lot of
as
people
far as
that
the poundage
you're
goes,
different. You don't count.
the SWCD staff would provide technical assistance, so it has to go
Me-
through their
Yeah.
technical review.
Well, that's why, because you see a lot of other places have
Right.
some sort of
Well, the
seeding rate
teaspoon
calculator.
sprinkler,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, that's one. Because again, what's a cover crop?
They used to
Green
have
and
multiple
growing.
species even, but I agree, you don't want to lighten it up too much, or what's the point?
And so then so now I still tell people, and I get this question all the time, at what point does it pay to put a cover crop in? The fuel, the time, the labor, the tractor, whatever it is, seed cost. I tell them all the time, if you can get down on your knees and you see a light tinge of green across that field, it was worth every dime. How can that be? How can that be?
It's the roots.
Well, not just the roots, but what you got to look at is every one of those plants. I always compare it to a AAA battery. You have millions of AAA batteries. The sun is energy. Our eyes are what converts the sun energy into our bodies, right? And then a plant, we obviously have photosynthesis. So every one of those is energy stored from the sun. That when you recycle it, the amount of energy you just put into that field, because everything happens, nutrient exchange, everything's driven by energy. The amount of energy that you've harvested and captured, the amount of N that you've captured now has just totally changed the dynamics, and you've actually changed the biological presence of that field now too. So it's worth it. But go convince a farmer of that. It's hard. And so I go back to the more plants we have, the more energy we capture. And if we're going to subsidize it with taxpayer money, we need to really, I think there needs to be, can we just say, hey, it'd be nice just to make sure that nobody's cheating the system? Because it's a lot of money to give out. I can
Well,
do the math
they
right
will do
away.
verification on the cover crop plant.
Yeah.
And they get receipts for the cost of the seed.
And the Wabasha covers this whole geographic area, approves all the contracts?
This will be for their portion of the Whitewater watershed.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
the upper half.
So
Yep.
what about the rest of the, Is there
Well,
another
I have the
sub-agreement?
same sub-agreement for Winona County.
Okay.
We did not do one for Olmsted County because Skip, he's focused on the soil health program that Olmsted County is having in the county.
Okay.
And didn't want to muddy the waters, so to speak. So he opted out of.
So, thanks
Fine.
Olmsted County for your share.
they like thank you cards.
Olmsted County pays the
Donate
bills,
some
so.
cookies. All right, so we need a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mark, second by Bob, for the Wabash County SWD sub-agreement. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Number 3, Winona, so this is Winona County.
So same
Yes,
thing?
this is for Winona County,
Any
same
different?
agreement.
Okay.
No
No
verbiage
difference, they're
difference, okay.
identical.
Okay, I'll
Any
move to
discussion?
approve. I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Marcia, second by Bob. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. All right, Whitewater Drinking Water Protection Grant updates. So Mr. Tyler Burke, correct?
Right, so under this grant, we had the septic system request for financial support, and within the grant, we have funding available for septic system upgrades for homeowners that meet certain criteria. And he did, and his system was, well, what he had for a system was, he was having surfacing. It was an imminent threat to public health and needs to be fixed. So in October, we approved that cost share for 75% of the cost of that septic system. And before the snow flew, everything got flagged out and they were ready to go, but then the snow just kept on coming. And then the spring, we had soggy weather, and now everything, contracting is still behind, trying to catch up. And originally, we had signed a contract until June 30th. Well, that's in a couple weeks, and they're not quite there yet. So I did an amendment to that contract until,
October
Was
20th?
October? August, October.
I think October.
October.
Yeah.
10:30.
Yep, October. So, and so anyway, they said it will be done by then. And I'm hoping that's the case, because I don't want to do another amendment. So that's what that is.
We need a motion for that.
I move to approve the Tyler Burke amendment.
Was that you?
Well, I was just wondering, is this going to be essentially for the same amount then?
Mhm.
regardless?
That, I'm still going with that same estimated amount, yes.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Motion moved by Bob, second by Mark. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Barron's C2.
Okay, so Dave Barron, same thing. He would like to initiate a cover crop, or not a cover crop, septic system cost share for his system, which is in badly need of fixing up. And I know this is, so he went and got a quote from Hofschulte that is $24,975, and it's a mound system, and it's $1,125 for the electric. So that's his one preliminary quote. And I know I've had some discussions this past couple weeks with Josh about that, and I have at everybody's this little spreadsheet. You know, what is a fair amount for a septic system? Well, basically you have two types. You have the regular trench system, which is gravity feed, and that is the lesser expensive option. Once you start getting into a mound system because you have clay or something like that, then you have bigger expense because you have a lot of dirt to haul. And then you have to do the electric because it pumps up the effluent into the system. So I talked with septic system staff at Winona County. You know, what's a good quote? You know, at the county we've been doing a low-income septic system upgrade grant since 2014, and we get money from the state to do 1 or 2 a year or whatever. So that's what I have on this spreadsheet. I don't have the names of the individuals or the families, but I have the year that the project was completed, and then what's highlighted in gray are the mound systems that we funded through the county. And then I have the contractor, and then if I was able to track down the household size, because that determines the size of the tank, I put that in as well. And then I have a column for the estimate, the original estimate that was submitted to the county when they were going through the program. And then what was finally invoiced. Sometimes the invoice amount was less, sometimes it was a bit more. And then what we paid from funding to the landowner. Initially, we had a $10,000 max, so that's why there's two of them that are maxed at 10,000. Later, we're at 15,000 as a max. So that's how the rates are coming out. So you can see that generally, mound systems as well as the trench systems are increasing. There are two anomalies. The one that has, for the year 2018, the estimated amount was $7,045, or that was the invoiced amount, and then we paid $5,283. That was not a full septic system that was installed. They already had a tank with a pipe, so they had a drain field put in. So it wasn't, so it completed the system. And then the trench system under 2016, the cost was $5,466, was also an anomaly because they already had the drain field, which was functioning fine. The tank had a hole in it, so they had to replace the tank. So that those two weren't full systems. So that's why those two numbers and estimates are lower. But generally, so these were done with our low-income situation. And then Winona County has some ARPA funding that we made available to do upgrades for failing systems or those that fail to protect groundwater. And in the month of May, the media really got a hold of this, and we ended up with 30 applications during the month of May that we received. Far more funds than we have funding for. So Lou and I are kind of filter, who we say yes to and who we say no to. But interestingly, four of these had already submitted, they already had designs done by contractors. And they also provided the dollar amount. This is how much it'll cost. And the one was a mound system. So these are people that solicited without knowing that they potentially could have some funding available. Their septic system, the mound system, was quoted at $25,390. So that was a mound system. And then I have three designs for trench systems. One was $14,600, one was $14,883, and one was $17,524. So those are all kind of in the ballpark for a trench system. Knowing the contractor knowing that there is no funding, but there might be now that we have, they haven't started work yet. So anyway, just to kind of lay that out there, and I know that we had a discussion when we approved the septic system in October, should we have some parameters? And the thing that, in talking with Eric and Lou at the county, the problem is, if you have a quote, the thing is, you're asking for a bid, and a lot of these contractors want to do a design. Well, a design costs $1,000. So do we require a landowner or homeowner to get two bids that potentially cost $1,000? Or can we ask for a preliminary bid? And then that gets really squishy too. But anyway, that's the information that I have. And I might say too that in talking with Lou and Eric, they said it's really hard to compare one contractor's design with another's because they each have their own strengths, or some might not want to do seeding afterwards. They leave that to the home. That reduces the cost. I want to say too, like for example, the one in 2022, the owner provided all of the sand and the trucking. He has a excavating business, so he did, so that one, even though it was a mound system, was less. Yes. Okay.
So, couple quick comments on that. Well, first of all, anybody have any other discussion?
Well, I was just gonna say, if we get an estimate come in and it just appears to be way out of line, then I think it's, hey, just a minute here, what's going on?
Yeah.
Couple things that I keep alluding back to is just accountability with taxpayer money. And you know, dealing with multiple different properties and businesses and everything else, I would never do anything without at least two things, especially if I don't know what I'm doing. If I'm in something, okay, that's one thing, but if I'm not in something, how do I know what's presented at me is fair? I think part of the thing that I see multiple times, and I see this in different groups, even in SWCDs, is we tend to fall back on the same people, or the homeowner says, or the landowner, or whoever says, who do you recommend? And we recommend the person that's gonna make it the easiest, but there's never a system on us. And because we foot so much of the bill, it's so marginal to the landowner or the homeowner. So what ends up happening is we don't know if there's inflated pricing, they just automatically know they're gonna get the job. Even if it's 10%, every 10 jobs, that's another job we could have done. And so when I look at this and I say the series of several bids come into play, we do have to factor in, okay, is there a charge to create a bid? Is there a soft bid? Is there a way to look at it? This information is awesome, Sheila. The problem with it is Mark and anybody in here that knows anything about construction is gonna say, hey, there's 10 ways to skin a cat, right? And then, or 9 ways to skin a cat, and the 10th way is probably the correct. And that is one of the things that I see, and we even allude to your bids for what we're going to talk about here shortly, the difference in how one person sees the other thing. So it's another way to catch when he says, hey, it's going to take 3 yards, and the other guy says it's going to take 2, and you get the surprise, right? And you can say, well, now who's actually correct? What is it going to be? And so it shows you what that person might miss, just as well as it could show you, are they overcharging or doing something they didn't need to do? And it gives you the opportunity to be a little more accountable with the taxpayers' money, because we do fund these things so heavily for most landowners or homeowners. And so I allude back to just being very accountable, and I think we can use our government system that can look over 2 bids, 3 bids, whatever it is, and say, hey, here's the discrepancy. Chances are this would need that 3rd one, right? So it's already built in, whatever it is, right?
I have a question, just occurred to me, which should be obvious, but do we have any way to actually test the efficacy of a system? Are there any like dead wells or whatever they call them to take a sample out of, and the design for each particular person's area? How's that play into it?
The guy building it usually does the testing, and so you
Right.
know
Yeah.
what it's,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
part
So
of
they
the problem.
do.
And they tell you what kind of a system you
Right.
will
But
put
now-
in.
Yeah.
With all
And that
this,
can be such a
they're
variable that you get a
licensed,
bid, you
right?
don't really
Yes.
know.
Anybody that does septic systems is licensed by the state of
Correct.
Minnesota.
Correct.
Contractors are licensed.
Right,
yes.
so, you know, you talk about accountability, do we have any accountability with the state, how they're
Yes,
licensing them? Are
they have recurring training,
And they,
and yes.
yeah.
But that's
And
more
then-
so on the functionality of
Right.
what it takes. It's not on the bid itself as to,
But
hey,
how much
are we getting
leeway
gouged?
would there be, though?
Right, or are they, because let's just
Efficiency
say it this way.
cost.
The other side of this too is you could have a guy that's desperate for work, he underbills it, he's shortchanging everything, you know, he's supposed to be doing the right thing. And then now you have the other guy that comes in and says, oh, this guy, right? Yeah, he tends to you know, he's not doing it correctly. Here's my bid to do it the correct way. It's accountability both ways. It's not only just the high side, but it's also on the low side. Now we just funded with taxpayers' money a really bad job. And but
Yeah.
I don't know that it's a bad job. I can't.
County staff do verify that it
Yeah.
was
properly.
built as it should be.
Now, years ago, University of Minnesota Extension had workshops about septic, know your septic system.
Yes. Yep,
And I don't know if that
remember
still exists or not.
No,
Okay.
well,
And
I
is,
think it's more online.
okay,
Yeah.
I guess, because we're talking about bids and the homeowner not knowing these systems and everything, is there anywhere in the system a checklist for the homeowner to
Yes.
ask the contractor, what are you doing, you know? Would that help educate
I
the
think that's what the
homeowner?
county's doing, but I go back to it and say, but why even go through all this? All we gotta do is get 2 quotes, call 2 companies. You know, and now in
But
the
if they're
design,
charging it.
but on a
1,000.
design, and that's where we take this, so this isn't just at well protection, for septic system. I'm just saying in general,
Anything.
when we do
Oh, yeah.
dozing, when we do any of these projects that we do,
Should have two.
you know, we should really be making sure that we're doing things correctly, because we can catch where somebody comes in and says, no, that's not, you're riding the line on legality, or you're riding the line on doing a good job, you really should do it this way. And then ultimately, the homeowner can pick, and we're still gonna, you know, if they say, hey, I believe this guy, it's worth the extra money to me,
Right.
great, and we pay out the same 15 grand, I don't know, to me, it just seems a lot more accountable and transparent than always just, oh, we got one bid and we run with it every time,
Yeah.
so. In business, I would never do it, so I
Well,
just,
in government, we have to get multiple, certain
Yeah.
dollar amount, you have to get multiple bids, and you don't
Yeah.
have to take the lowest one, then you take the most.
yeah, it's all with
responsible.
discretion. Yep. But it just, that's for accountability and transparency, you know,
So
so,
it
I don't
looks
know.
like, looks like a,
I'm big on that,
yeah,
so.
the cheapest one, of course, that was just minimal.
How long do these last?
Septic systems?
Yeah.
Oh, forever.
Like, no, we
As long as
wouldn't,
you don't move.
legally?
They claim 30 years.
30
Yeah, I was gonna say,
generally.
We've just, Waukesha County's looking at their septic ordinance for changes and when is an inspection required
Yeah.
and everything.
In Winona County, if you sell your property, it has,
Yeah.
the
Subject
septic
to
has to,
inspection.
has to be inspected and
I think
operating.
maintenance can make a difference, like if you
Yes.
have your tank pumped
Oh, 100%.
regularly and all
Yeah.
those sorts of things too. Some people might slack on that and then it's ruined pretty quickly.
Technically 30 years. is
You live in the city?
our
That's a good
sanitary.
number.
Yeah.
You live in the city?
I'm coming at this from a real different perspective since I live in the city.
Yep.
And I mean, I hear the $20,000, $30,000 or whatever price tag for putting in a septic system. And basically what that's replacing, for the city, our stormwater, our wastewater,
Yep.
sewer and whatnot.
Yep.
So I'm thinking, well, okay, now I pay
How much per month?
$25, $30 a month at least in order to do this. And
Yeah.
if that's working out, and
You get a pretty good deal.
Yeah, where do you
Yeah,
live?
here.
Yeah, part of it is, in my opinion,
Yeah,
cities
sure,
don't
but-
plan for replacement. And then they go to the state legislature and want our money in bonding to upgrade or replace their wells or their, you
Welcome to
know.
what Elter is dealing with right now.
Yeah,
some might, I suppose.
oh, I think
and
a lot of
others
them
might
do,
not.
small
No.
cities.
No, well, I mean, obviously, it's gonna cost me less because there's
Multiple.
10,000 houses
Right.
or 10,000
Yeah,
homesteads in
Toilets
Rochester
flushing
that are all
daily.
sharing the cost, and this is one person or one house.
The whole infrastructure thing is,
The whole thing.
I don't want to get started, but a lot of cities have antiquated, like New York City is like 2 million gallons of water a day they waste just because it's leaking out of pipes, so.
One of the, so this alludes back
Infrastructure.
to something I bring up a lot too,
Oh,
and we see it in the sprawling.
Sorry, I brought this.
No, it's good, it's okay.
13 minutes.
Yeah, we got 13 minutes.
We need to
This is our last
educate-
item, so we got one more.
educate ourselves.
But here's the real reality. This goes back to what we keep seeing. People are moving out of the cities, they're finding these places in the country, and they are not budgeting to live in the country.
Yep.
And us as taxpayers are picking up the tab. Sure, they afforded, the bank said you can afford the payment. But can you afford the 30 grand? Can you afford when the well goes? Can you afford to deal with the Oriental bittersweet? Can you afford to deal with the erosion? They give you a loan on the property, but can you actually afford the property?
Yeah.
And they're turning back to the taxpayers to say, oh, help us out.
Yep.
And it's like, so then you go to why do the cities side? Because now I can take all those payments, cost average them over the next 30 years, and I just write you a check every month, because that's an easier way to do it. And that is a problem with our banking system today, is they're not holding people accountable for the true cost of that property.
I have doctors complaining living on Apple Blossom Drive. It's gonna cost me $80,000 to $100,000 before I put a brick in for my house between the septic and the well.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's $80,000 to $100,000. And I
And
have
now-
doctors complaining.
And now you got 30 years to save to do it again at 3 times the cost in 30 years, probably.
Maybe.
Twice, you know?
I mean, in the last 3 years, wells have gone up probably 30% this
Yeah.
last 3
Okay,
years.
so now we're gonna quadruple. But that's this thing, and so that's part of this educational piece of careful what you buy, because you're going back to the taxpayer saying, hey, let's supplement you. Well, if I said, hey, I can't afford my water bill, my sewer bill in town, where's the grant to help me pay for it?
Well, that
See-
brings up, are these people income qualified or just?
Yes.
Okay.
Right,
So,
but see, they weren't, in Tyler, I like Tyler. Tyler, they're just phenomenal people, but when you have a piece of property, you gotta be able to afford these things, and this is part
Yeah.
of it. You know, if my line from the street to the house, if your line from the street to the house breaks,
It's yours.
past there, that's on me. And it ain't no funding to go get it fixed anywhere. And it's now I got no water. Well, my sewer's worthless, I got no water to put in it. So, these are the things that I think we have to do, an educational piece, and actually hold some sort of accountability to people that are buying rural properties and say, hey, we can't keep bailing y'all out. You better have the money. It's not just buying the house. So
Absolutely.
that's been saying that for years. Okay, so Mr. Behrens,
Yes,
I'll make a motion to approve.
okay.
I'll second.
or Tyler, actually, we're on Burke, excuse me. No, we did that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
We're on
we
Behrens,
did
Behrens,
Tyler,
yep.
now we're on
Behrens.
Behrens, yes.
Burke and Behrens.
Yep.
Okay,
So we got his done.
Yeah.
We got a motion
Yep.
by Mark, second by Bob,
Okay.
for Mr. Behrens' septic system. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
okay. And I might add, there was another one I was hoping to get on for the agenda, but we have some parcel boundary issues, and just FYI, I hope to have it on the August 17th meeting. She has a very, very small parcel, and the existing septic system is not even a septic system. It's been backing up, and it's been an issue. But anyway, she has a couple of legal things. The neighboring parcel is co-owned by her and siblings, so we need to get all the signatures. It needs to go to get a variance because the Hofschulte said this is where it needs to be placed, and it's less than 10 feet to the city parcel next door. So we have to go through a variance for that. So that'll be on August 17th, and but I will have it at that next
Most of
meeting.
the time, we just put it on our neighbor's property.
I know.
They just
Yeah.
hold it,
Just do it late at night in the dark.
And her quote, she already provided me with a bid for $16,000, but I will be bringing that at the August meeting, just FYI.
How many months can you rent a porta potty for $16,000?
And that's all I have for that.
All right, online item D, Whitewater well sealing grant, well sealing contract, Mr. Bob Christie. So here we've got a little bit of a conflict of interest because Mark here, his company, is also one of the bidders. So we have an open discussion about this. We're just gonna ask that Mark abstains from the vote.
Yeah.
Sometime.
Yep.
Was he the lowest responsible bidder?
No, he wasn't.
We don't talk about him until he's out of the room.
If I could talk about both bids side by side, and for this, Bob Christie has a well that was a pasture well, no longer being used, and he's tired of driving around it. But anyway, so he was looking for, he was originally working with the SWCD, and he got 2 bids, and one from Mark, his was $3,595, and one from Peterson Well Drilling, $2,455. You might think, wow, there's a big difference, but not when you look at them in more detail. The Peterson bid included 2 yards of grout, and then Mark's included 3. And then Peterson's bid said, well, if it takes more than 2 yards, we're gonna add $575 per extra yard, and then $380 for a trip charge, because it'll do it again. And so when you take that into account, they do get, I talked with Ross Dunsmore at the county, in his opinion, comparing side by side, and he said, they're not that far different. The only big difference is there's, Mark's bid includes 6 hours of time. This one includes 4 hours of time, which would potentially be higher anyway if it was included extra grout. And in Ross's opinion, looking at that part of the township, he thought it'll take 3 yards. And so they're not that far apart.
So what do we need to do today?
Well,
The
Bob
landowner?
Christie signed a contract, and I put for the estimated cost, I took the Peterson bid and I added the extra yard and the extra trip. And so that comes to $3,410 as an estimate. So I guess my thoughts are, if Bob initially got Mark's bid. I'm assuming that is his preference? I don't know. I
We
didn't.
let the landowner decide, correct?
Yeah, that's what my thought is, let the landowner decide.
And it wasn't with the 2 hours of potential extra time, even,
Mhm.
right?
Right,
Plus a
and,
trip charge.
right,
So really, the vote here needs to just be that we approve it based
Okay.
on Bob's discussion, but also,
Do we put a max on
we have a
that?
cap of 3,000. in
ours
there.
is 3,000 regardless.
That's
So we
the
just need to
pressure,
approve
yeah.
the 3,000, but because it potentially could benefit Mark, we're just asking him to.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So
that
we
makes
just,
sense.
all we're approving is the 3,000.
Okay, I would move to approve the 3,000 max
I'll
Okay.
second that.
parcel.
Motion
Okay.
made by Marcia, second by Bob to approve the 3,000 max. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
All right, and then we'll let
One
Bob
abstain?
Christie
One
decide
abstain,
which
yeah.
one he goes with.
Yes,
One abstain, motion approves.
all right.
All
And
right,
then we'll let Bob decide that, and please give him that information.
yes, I will do
Yep.
that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. There's no agencies,
And-
nobody's here.
Yep, and thank you for letting me put on those, I thought I had everything all done, and, oh, Mike, can you have this? But anyway, it is what it is, I'm glad we were able to get them in and approved. And I have as Marcia referenced, the flyers for the WinLAC. I plan to hand these out at the fair, and what that is not professionally printed yet, it'll be on nicer paper. But we're moving forward with that.
That's fine. Just one thing, I've been on this board many years ago, and then I come and I'll probably be gone again in a couple months if we get. So many of the groups I sit on, and maybe you have this, I just haven't seen it or sought it out, is you got all these grants. If you make a grant sheet
Oh.
and when they started, when they are ending, the
Oh.
amount and how it goes down, because you amended a bunch of things. So now some of those are extended. It's just one sheet you can look at quick, one sheet.
Not here, Marcia, we memorize
You
all that.
memorize.
Yeah, you gotta be good to be on
Well, then
that
I,
Somebody make a motion to adjourn?
Not yet. Marcia's still on the docket, so.
but it is helpful when you come and go and you know when this grant's ending and when you need to start
Okay.
looking for another
That's a good
one.
idea, kind of like a quick reference.
Yes, yes.
It does every once in a while get a little confusing, so I do need a motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Second.
Send you a
Motion made by
copy.
Mark, second by, we'll give it to James. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Yeah,
We
you're
are
out of
adjourned.
here early.